Hello and welcome back to Talking Giants. It is November 10th, 2025. This is Talking Giants brought to you by SeatGeek. And the New York Football Giants have just fired Brian Daboll as head coach in 61 games. He finishes with a 20-40-1 record, and his record over the last 3 seasons has been 11-33. Since he started his career 9-8-1 with the playoff victory in 2022. Mike Kafka has been named the interim head coach, which makes sense since he is the team's assistant coach, and we'll break that down and talk more about that and how I think there could be layers to that in a little while. That's a title that Mike Kafka got in 2024 after him and Daboll's relationship was in doubt and in question. Brian Daboll being fired was an inevitable outcome as this team started to lose more and more games, especially in the fashion in which they have lost them this year. And it felt like losing Jackson Dart to injury was the straw that broke the camel's back. That made this decision, that really made it okay to make this decision. When's the last time, I didn't write this down, when's the last time the Giants have fired a head coach in season? Producer Jeff, if you want to look, they did it with McAdoo. But even before him, obviously they fired McAdoo in season. But when's the last time that they fired, besides McAdoo, another coach in season? I feel like, and even McAdoo was like, with how many games? 4 games left? This is a lot of games. Brian Daboll's the first head coach fired in the NFL this year. So this definitely is not the quote-unquote giant way. But what even is the giant way anymore, right? What even is the giant way? And I do want to reflect on Daboll's entire tenure as a whole. And we will do that. But the undivided attention now needs to turn to Joe Schoen. I still think Brian Daboll, who deserves to be fired, I still think he has done a better job than Joe Schoen. Somehow, if you put a gun to my head, who has done a better job, Brian Daboll or Joe Schoen, I would say Brian Daboll has done a better job with what he's got, still deserves to be fired, than Joe Schoen. So that is where the attention of every fan, every analyst, every reporter, and that is the attention of myself, that is where we are going to go to, is, are the Giants going to make the right decision to totally clean house and make this and start from fresh as they should? Brian Daboll, as the years have gone on, I think he has made a lot of little mistakes that have compounded it themselves, and they've turned into major reasons why this team loses games, and that's ultimately why he's been fired. But before we get into Joe Schoen and Mike Kafka, I want to make this a little bit of an ep and a little bit of a reaction. I feel like I want to reflect on Daboll's tenure and just how unbelievable it is that we have landed here after the momentum that he had, that this team, but also Brian Daboll had in 2022. I mean, if you've been with us for a couple years, I remember Mr. Purple. And ironically enough, Mr. Purple's a bar in New York City. We live streamed that game, and we had like 200 people at a bar. Giants versus Vikings. Ironically enough, we had the Giants-Vikings playoff game on that watch party in New York City, ironically enough. And I remember that day. That was one of the best days of my life. We were at a bar, 200 people there. We're live streaming the game. The Giants just scored on every single drive, and they won a playoff game. And that year, we thought that we had a coach that coached to win, not just to not lose, but we had a coach that coached to win. That roster was awful. That roster was bad. Some may argue that 2022 roster is somehow worse than kind of what we had in 2020. Like, it's definitely worse than now. Like, the roster now is better. Like, they were running out Richie James and Kenny Golladay and Kadarius Toney and then Isaiah. Like, they were signing guys off the street, multiple guys off the street. And they were doing like good solid moves there, but they they adjusted to the personnel that they had. As Jeff sends me a message, 1976, the year that they started 0-7 with Bill Arnsparger before replacing him with John McVay. He thinks that was it. Okay, that's not that they before Ben McAdoo that they fired a coach in season. But 2022, man, I just can't believe how far we have fallen from then. Like, that little run in that year was incredible, and we're like, we are only going to get better from here. And then 2023, you go into that season with expectations and energy, and man, were we all humbled really quick. Man, were we humbled by, man, maybe that 2022 wasn't that good. And, you know, it was a good timing of teams not knowing how to stop DJ's legs. And they had a really easy schedule, and they played the worst defense in the league in that playoff game. And that's, you know, I'm never going to apologize for any of that. You never apologize for winning games, and especially you never apologize for winning a playoff game. But man, were we humbled real quick. But here's one of the issues. I don't think Brian Daboll was necessarily humbled by that. Brian Daboll in 2023 started to, like, the warts started to really show of the flaws that he has as a head coach and a leader. I think 2023 exposed that he is an impulsive decision maker. A guy that we thought in 2022 was calculated, and we talked about the analytics people and the people up in the booth, and they're helping inform him make fourth down decisions and what to do and how to operate as a coach on game day, right? But I think 2023 showed that that's all bullshit. That this guy is just going to do what he wants to do. He is an impulsive person, decision maker, who took play calling away from Kafka week two, by the way, against the Cardinals. Week 2, took it away from Mike Kafka, gave it to Shea Tierney, took it away from Kafka, took it away from Shea Tierney, and then gave it to himself. All that was a really, really bad look. The Wink Martindale situation, while I think it looks worse for Wink on a professionalism standpoint, just created this cloud around Brian Daboll that he had a difficult time working with others. And at the same time, it became very apparent as the Giants also started to lose, they had a problem of holding their players accountable for poor play and poor effort. So you had a head coach that is, probably behind the scenes is reaming his assistant coaches and is digging into them. Meanwhile, players are never held accountable for bad play and bad effort. And I think this bleeds into what we see in 2024 and even 2025 with guys like Deonte Banks, how Jalen Hyatt has been dealt with just total kid gloves as the years have gone on. There's no accountability for not being good at your job when it comes to these players. The months of September and October were always a struggle for Brian Daboll. The only time they didn't start 0-2 outside of 2022 was 2023, where they started 1-1 and they beat the Cardinals, but then they proceeded to lose the next 4 games. So September and October were always a struggle under Brian Daboll, and it never felt like his teams were ready to play football when it matters most. Football is not a sport like and we all know this. Football is not a sport like baseball where you can go and you can get them next month. There is no you can go and get them next week in the NFL. Every game matters. And especially when you root for this football team, and we're fans of this football team, when you go 0-2, your season is practically over. The kicker situation was handled awful. Graham Gano suffered his first injury in 2023. Yet, whether that's a combination of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll together, I would put it more or less in line of Brian Daboll is responsible for the guys that run out there. The guys that run out there on game day. That's who Brian Daboll is responsible for. The players that suit up, or even the players that he decides to not suit up. Jameis Winston being quarterback 3. Even going with Tommy DeVito the first time around was an insane thing. An insane thing when Tyrod Taylor was so much better than Tommy DeVito. Like, that was even insane back then. there's definitely these little things that I'm forgetting, right? How Evan Neal was treated, but so many of these things also blend in with Joe Schoen, which goes to the point of Joe Schoen has done a worse job than Brian Daboll. All of these mistakes and all these little things that Brian Daboll has done a bad job with, Joe Schoen has also somehow done an even worse job. Both of them deserve to go. So this is step one. I feel bad for Brian Daboll. I really thought, dude, like, talk to yourself in 2022 and tell you 3 years later this is how it's going to end. 3 years later that this is going to end. It's nuts, man. It's nuts when you really reflect on it all. You know, when you put down your pitchfork for a second, it's just nuts how all this has gone on. Oh, and next to my notes, I have Shane Bowen. Like, another thing with Brian Daboll and how this has ended for him. The hiring of Shane Bowen was awful. They didn't want him to begin with. But what's even worse is I understand hiring him because you interviewed a bunch of different candidates and nobody wanted to come here, right? Nobody wanted to come here. But you went after, like, the top defensive coordinators that offseason. And then Shane Bowen was like your third or fourth choice, right? But what's even worse than hiring him to begin with is keeping him after 2024, where I think Daboll didn't like him. And clearly how John Mara spoke about Shane Bowen on that field, on Quest Diagnostics, being like, I'm sick and tired of watching offenses go up and down against us. Everybody looked at each other being like, Shane Bowen's gone. Shane Bowen's gone. So we all thought he's gone, and then lo and behold, 1 week goes by, he's there. 2 weeks goes by, he still stays. And I think that move to retain Shane Bowen, I think that is the ultimate reason why Brian Daboll's gone right now. Because this defense is awful, and they are not supposed to be this awful. They are not supposed to be this awful. If they have an average defense, they have simply an average defense paired with their average offense. You know, maybe they only blow one of those leads in the fourth quarter, right? And think of how different this season is. So Daboll did a lot of those other things wrong, but having an awful defense and sticking by Shane Bowen, I think one of the biggest reasons why it has led here, the Giants being this bad, the Giants being 2-8, and Brian Daboll being fired. But it also, Brian Daboll didn't do himself any favors by building this reputation that he is hard to work with, that he is an impulsive person, that he doesn't hold his players accountable, and that he doesn't have his teams ready to play in September and October. Those are all things that Brian Daboll did himself as well. So it brings us to the here and now, folks. Mike Kafka is the interim head coach. That is immediately what is next. I am still like going through in my brain. I am still wondering if the Giants as an organization, do they feel like they can have a complete regime change and go through that right now with John Mara's cancer diagnosis and John Mara's health? They shouldn't feel that way. They shouldn't. But I think it's the reality of the situation that we're in right now. John Mara even told us this past January, that he had doubts about Joe Schoen, saying things like, I don't know. I can't tell you if the roster is better right now than it is from where Joe Schoen first took over. John Mara said that and then chose to retain Joe Schoen. So there's already doubts. Even heading into this year, about Joe Schoen and what he's done with this roster in John Mara's mind, right? I can't believe this. There's already doubts. So John Mara may feel like, I can't fire Joe Schoen. I like his process. I like what he does behind the scenes, right? But John Mara may feel like, I'm going to restrict Joe Schoen on who he hires at head coach. I don't like what you've done with the roster. I have my doubts about you, but I still want to keep you since I don't want to fire you and do all of this all over again. So I'm going to keep you, but I'm going to restrict what you can do at head coach. Mike Kafka may be Mike Kafka may be the head coach of the New York Football Giants in 2026. That may be a reality that we live in. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it won't be. Maybe Mara won't restrict Joe Schoen on what he can do in that regard. But I also think that Mara has 100% regrets. He has regrets on how he handled Pat Shurmur, on how he let Dave Gettleman, the snake that he was, how he let Dave Gettleman get in his ear and fire Pat Shurmur after 2 years, but only 1 year of Daniel Jones. A rookie year in which Daniel Jones threw for 24 touchdowns, and he turned the ball over a lot, but man, they were explosive and they scored some points, right? John Mara still has regrets over that. That's in the back of his brain. So I wonder in John Mara's brain if promoting Mike Kafka to see what you have in him, a guy that's been interviewed around the NFL. Like the Giants have had a bottom 3 offense around the NFL, yet Mike Kafka has been the finalist of head coaching jobs over the last 2 years. I know the Seahawks have really had an interest in Mike Kafka. They maybe had an interest in him as head coach previously before they hired Mike McDonald. And then especially they had an interest in him when the Seahawks were looking for an offensive coordinator this past offseason. So I am wondering if that is weighing on John Mara's brain of, am I really going to, Jackson Dart's having a really good rookie year. Am I really going to reset this whole thing for him as well? Am I going to make the same quote unquote mistake that I made when I fired Shurmur with Daniel Jones and reset this kid? Even though that is the wrong way to look at it, because I think Jackson Dart's better than Daniel Jones. I think what you're seeing Jackson Dart do is even more impressive than what Daniel Jones was doing his rookie year. The off-platform stuff, the third down ability, not taking sacks, not turning over the ball. Outside of moments. But he's been responsible with the ball. The lack of negative plays, the lack of sacks. Those are things that Daniel Jones got his ass kicked in, sacks and turnovers and things like that. Jackson Dart can be explosive. Jackson Dart's been money on third down. He's the best quarterback in the NFL on third down right now. I don't think that's just because of Mike Kafka. I don't think that's just because of Brian Daboll. I think it's because he's good. Producer Jeff slacked me something. Connor Hughes. What did Connor Hughes say? The feeling internally, I'm told, is the Giants believe the talent is better than the results have shown, evident by 4 losses despite holding 10-point leads. That plus the Jackson Dart injury called forth for the change. The Giants view this as a test for Mike Kafka, which I agree with. I agree that the Giants view it this way. They want to see how his leadership radiates to the rest of the staff and players. It's among reasons no other staff changes are expected at this time. This does not mean that defense coordinator Shane Bowen is safe the rest of the season. Thank you to Connor Hughes for tweeting that out. So I do think Mike Kafka being interim head coach, Brian Daboll being fired now, I think that is being done so they can see what they have in Mike Kafka. Because I do think it is a possibility that Mike Kafka is the head coach next year. I do think that is but what can you really do? Like, is Mike Kafka, if Mike Kafka starts to come in here and be like, Deontay Banks, you're benched. Does Mike Kafka, as head coach, will he have the autonomy and the say to be like, you know what? Why are we wasting roster spots on Jalen Hyatt and Evan Neal? They don't play. We need roster spots. Forget the offensive line. Wide receiver. How nice would it be to get little Jordan Humphrey out there for anything? For anything. As a blocker. As a contested catch guy. So we don't have to rely on Gunnar Olszewski being your lead backup wide receiver after Darius Slayton goes down. They need linebackers. We are wasting roster spots. Every single week, these guys are collecting game checks because they suck, and we're okay with that. Is that a Daboll thing or is that a Shane thing? So is that what Mike Kafka is really going to come in and demand? What is Mike Kafka going to demand of Shane Bowen? What is that conversation going to look like? What are they going to do differently? I don't know, man. I don't know. Next head coach, I haven't thought about it outside of Kafka. Justin, who do you think should be the next head coach? What are candidates out there? Tell you what, I'm going to roll my eyes every time I see it. No John Gruden, no Brian Flores. I can tell you that much. There's names of Clint Kubiak and Mike McCarthy, I think if John Mara's head, it feels like he would want someone with experience. McAdoo was a first-time. Everybody since Coughlin was a first-time head coach besides Pat Shurmur. McAdoo was a first-time head coach. Pat Shurmur felt like a first-time head coach because he lost a lot of fucking games in Cleveland. Judge was a first-time head coach. Daboll was a first-time head coach. I think he would want to get somebody in here with experience and also with success. Feels like Mike McCarthy would be it. Feels like Mike McCarthy would be it. I don't love that. I don't love anything about head coach with Joe Schoen here. I don't like any head coach hire they make with Joe Schoen here. Flat out, that is the truth. But no John Gruden. Stop suing the NFL. The Giants, with their standing relationship with the NFL, they are not going to hire somebody who has called the commissioner of the league slurs over email. They're not going to do that. And no Brian Flores, because he also has sued the Giants. I don't think that really went over well with Brian Flores and their relationship. So no Gruden, no Flores. And every time I'm asked about it, I'm going to roll my eyes at you because know the situation. And if you didn't know that they were suing the NFL, well then, now you know. Not happening. Clint Kubiak interests me. But again, every head coach candidate I don't like if Joe Schoen's here. I'm not going to love it because he is a dead man walking. He is a dead man walking. You know what? Jeff just sent me an ad. And you want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read that damn ad. I want to say I appreciate everybody hanging out. Midday, Brian Daboll fired reaction stream. So I will read that ad. I will read it. And I'm going to talk to you about SeatGeek. Today's Brian Daboll is fired reaction is brought to you by SeatGeek. Football is in full swing. The NBA and NHL playoffs are, The NBA and NHL are here as well. Playoffs with SeatGeek, the MLB's official ticket marketplace. Your tickets are fully guaranteed and instantly fulfilled in your account after purchase. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app in the world. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and so much more. Right now, you get tickets to Giants games. I am going to be there at the Vikings game, December 21st, and I will be there at the Cowboy game, the final game of the year, and I'm going to be really excited about that. I'm excited to go back to MetLife because I haven't been able to go yet. So join me, and you can use code GIANTS2025 on SeatGeek for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. You can even get parking passes on SeatGeek as well. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code GIANTS2025. Thank you to SeatGeek. Appreciate you. And I appreciate everybody hanging out right now. What do we got? I guess I can open up to some questions and some things in the chat. Jeff, if you want to flash some stuff on the screen that you think is good for me to ask while I'm talking, even though I don't have you in my ear, if you want to just flash some good questions on the screen, because I don't want to just look at the chat and then not talk. So this was inevitable again, but I kind of just can't believe after 2022 that we are here. We need to get back our defensive identity. We have our QB now. Yeah, Greg. And that's what even leaves me open to, like, if we feel like Jesse Minter is a Mike McDonald level candidate, who I loved Mike McDonald in Baltimore, loved that defensive identity. And I kind of viewed him as like one of the exceptions of, I typically like to hire offensive coaches. I like to hire offensive minds because I always worry about the Dan Quinn effect. When you lose Kyle Shanahan, what happens to you? Right? Look at what happened to the Falcons. When Bill Belichick loses Josh McDaniels, look at what happens, right? And also when he loses Tom Brady, that also hurts him too. But I think you understand the point. Whereas an offensive coach, if you find a guy that works, like a McVay, like a Andy Reid, like a Kyle Shanahan, he is the system. He ain't going anywhere. Similar with Brian Daboll. Like, why Brian Daboll was so enticing, especially working with a young quarterback, is because you don't have to worry about the system leaving, getting up and leaving. He is the system. I mean, even look at Dan Campbell right now. Dan Campbell just took play calling. He took play calling a little earlier in his head coaching career too, and now he just took it from Morton again. And they kick ass. Dan Campbell's like a legit, like, decent play caller, right? So that's why I always lean offensive head coaches, but I feel like Mike Macdonald is an exception to that because I feel like he has good infrastructure to also hire good people around him with that good, innovative mindset. Like Mike Macdonald calls defense. The way that he calls defense is the way that I would hate to face a defense of simulating pressure. You never know where pressure is going to come, but they're also not going to be so irresponsible to the point where they're going to allow a lot of big explosive plays. You know, these teams that blitz a lot, they can be vulnerable on the back end, right? They do a really nice job at a really nice mix and blend of their coverage identities. And I think that defensive identity that Mike Macdonald has on the defensive side of the ball, I think it reflects who he wants to hire on the offensive side of the ball. So Clint Kubiak, slam dunk hire. Heavy play action. We're going to look for the explosives, but we're also going to have an identity running the ball. That's something that Brian Daboll also never developed as well as Giants head coach. And he's also never developed as an offensive play caller, is a real good identity on the ground. So if we get the vibes that Jesse Minter can have a Mike Macdonald type of impact, which I don't know if I'm there yet. Like those Baltimore defenses kicked ass, and the Chargers defense kicks ass too. And they don't have all the talent in the world, but I just don't know that much about. I don't know that much about Jesse Minter as a person, and really, unless they have a former track record of being a head coach, I don't know if you can say that you know that this guy's going to be a slam dunk hire, unless they have already a proven track record of being a head coach in the NFL, right? Jeff, if you want to put up if there's another question up there, I would love to see it. Arizona head coach would be a great DC if that happens. Gannon, if he gets fired, I don't think that's going to be fired. Tasia, what's going on, my friend? What needs to happen for Shane to get fired? They need to lose more games. They need to lose. Am I at the point where I'm rooting for losses? I don't even know. You know what? I don't even know what I'm rooting for. And I hate the fan police sometimes as the years have gone on. And, you're wrong for wanting this. You're wrong for rooting for this. You're wrong for rooting for that. If the Giants losing every single game for the rest of the year means that Joe Schoen is fired, sign me up. And I hate that I'm saying that. Even in the years where the Giants desperately needed a quarterback, they would win football games, and I would feel good about it. I'd be like, my favorite football team just won a game, and we'll worry about the rest later. And I've always said that when you need positions or you need a quarterback, good teams find their way. They find their ways to get the quarterback. It doesn't always have to be the first or the second overall pick in the draft. The Giants did a good enough job of finding their way to Jackson Dart, and he looks like the fucking truth. So what needs to happen? They need to lose. They need to be embarrassed. That's what the 2021 Giants were. The Giants were embarrassed. The Giants were an embarrassment. They are an embarrassment. We know it, but what Joe Judge did, like that was the final straw. Dave Gettleman was always gone in 2021, but the final straw for John Mara, for Joe Judge, was the QB sneak. That moment, like, I can't do this. I cannot retain this guy after everything. The NFL world already laughed at the Giants. We go down to the Senior Bowl and talk to people and things like that. The NFL world has already laughed at the Giants that they retained Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. They've already done that. They need to lose more for ownership to be convinced that this is not the way to go. They need to lose as many games as possible. And it's fucked up, and I hate saying it. What I root for doesn't matter. What I root for and what I want to happen will not happen. Inevitably. I got a super chat. I'm going to read it. What are your thoughts on the Rams front office and coaching tree? GMs and coaches that come from the Rams building seem to succeed. Yeah, and first of all, Rich, thanks for the super chat. And just ask Todd Bowles. Ask Todd Bowles how plucking from the Sean McVay tree has gone from him. Dave Canales, pretty sure he was from that tree. Liam Cohen, I know he was from that tree. And then the offense coordinator that they have right now was from the McVay tree. Like every time the Bucs have an offensive coordinator that leaves and gets a head coaching job, he just finds somebody else that's promising from Sean McVay's staff, and then boom. And what's really cool about like some of these front offices, like the Rams are one of them. The Bengals at one point when they were not frowned upon like they are right now. I don't have these front offices like memorized on the back of my hand, but like some of these smaller front offices, like they don't like the Rams are. I think they have the resources, obviously being in LA with that stadium and everything like that. They're valued at a lot of money, but I think that's by choice of what they do over there. They run a tight operation, and it is not a lot of people. So, but I don't know if John Mara wants to right now. He doesn't want to, but he has to. Will he go through with the whole, I have to figure out all of this all over again? It's not just firing the GM. And it's a difficult decision. It's not just firing the GM. It's what is the building going to look like? What's the process of the building? How we do things here? Scouts, assistant GMs, all these different positions. It's an entire building that changes. And it's a difficult decision, but it's a necessary one. And I think he's scared to make it because they did such a 180 away from the George Young tree, which that's what Ernie Accorsi was part of the George Young tree. Jerry Reese was ultimately under Accorsi. Then going to Dave Gettleman, who was somehow part of that George Young, Ernie Accorsi tree, right? That was comfortable and that was safe. Joe Schoen was the uncomfortable thing to do. Brought technology in the building, and this impressed John Mara. It impressed John Mara. And also seeing what they did in 2022 impressed John Mara. But the results have just been awful. And you can't argue with them. And I'm laughing because it's like, it's no shit Sherlock podcasting right now, but they've been awful. And I don't understand. I understand why and how it's a difficult decision as the lights go out in Georgia. I understand why it's a difficult decision, but how do you not see that it's a necessary one? I do think if he didn't have cancer, it would be a slam dunk. They're both gone. But the fact that he has cancer, the fact that John Mara wants to run this team, are people around him going to tell him, you can't do this. You can't go through an entire regime search when you're battling cancer and when you're in the middle of this right now. I think I missed another super chat. I'll get it. If we get a new GM, how long do you think before they use Dart as an excuse for poor play and we need a QB? I'm glad you asked that, and thanks for the chat. I know that right now, Jackson Dart heading into year 2, Andrew Thomas on such a cheap, affordable contract, Brian Burns now looking like somehow a steal of a contract, Abdul Carter on his rookie deal, Kayvon Thibodeau going into his fifth-year option. Who else? Malik Neighbors on his rookie deal. These should be reasons why this GM and head coaching job should be very, very attractive. Very attractive. You keep Joe Schoen for one more year, then that means 2027, there's only 2 more years left until you have to make a decision on Jackson Dart's 5th-year option. Then there would be only 1 more year left. Next year will be year 3 of Malik Neighbors. So a first-round rookie's deal is 4 years plus a 5th-year option, but you have to pick up the 5th-year option. There is such a window right now, especially money-wise, money and draft capital, because they're going to suck and they're going to get a top 5 pick this year, right? There's such an opportunity. They have a top 5 pick. They're going to have a top 5 pick, and they're going to be like, you're going to take the job thinking, I really like Jackson Dart. The way that Robert Saleh, the way that Vic Fangio, the way that everybody, the way that Sean Payton, the way that every single person that has played the Giants has gone out of their way, and the best people in the league, the way that they have spoke glowingly about Jackson Dart, that should be a reason to want to get somebody who really wants to come here to clean house and to get very high quality candidates to interview for this job. And they will want it, regardless of the ownership situation, regardless of whatever dysfunction is happening in this leadership team right now. Tim McDonald being in this building for the last 12 years, as a scout, and the last 4 years being the director of player personnel, or at least the assistant or the director, right? Tim McDonald, John Mara's son-in-law, Chris Mara, having influence, but no, he doesn't matter. No, Chris Mara doesn't actually make decisions, but he's still going to sit in on the NFL draft. He's still going to go to the Senior Bowl. He's still probably going to go to the Combine, and he's still going to sit in on every head coach and every GM interview that we do. But he doesn't do anything, though. He doesn't have any influence. He just sits on only the most important fucking conversations that happen every single year in this building. But ignore all that. This will be a highly coveted job, and it's led by Jackson Dart, and it's led by Malik Neighbors, and it's led by Cam Scadaboo, and it's led by Andrew Thomas, and it's led by Brian Burns. Get somebody in here that knows their ass from their elbow, knows how to manage a kicker. And the first 2 years of a regime won't absolutely blow 4 top 100 picks away. Evan Neal, Josh Azudu, 2 top 100 picks. Total bust, unplayable, and teams, you can't even trade him because teams don't want him. 2023, Jalen Hyatt, Deontay Banks, unplayable. Traded up for Deontay Banks and Jalen Hyatt. If you don't have a GM that absolutely just wastes top 100 picks in the first 2 years of a regime, imagine where we'd be. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Brian Daboll's been fired. I talked about Daboll in the beginning, and now we're mad about Joe Schoen. Now we're mad about Giants ownership. That's what needs to happen next. This job should be attractive. This job is attractive. It's not as attractive if you only fire the head coach. If you only fire the head coach, it's not that attractive, right? So I don't know, man. I think I've reached the point where I gave a reaction. I gave a reaction. Hey, Jack from training camp, who do you think the Giants will pick up for coach now? Talked about that a little earlier. Mike Kafka is the interim head coach, and I think it is a possibility that Mike Kafka could be the head coach even going into next year. Joe Schoen is not fired, and John Mara does not want to repeat history of firing Pat Shurmur after Daniel Jones's rookie year, because that is on the back of his brain. A lot of people saying Joe Brady. I don't know. No Gruden. If you want my thoughts on who's next at head coach, I kind of gave it a little bit earlier. Fire Joe Schoen. It's also kind of hilarious how Brian Daboll is fired before Shane Bowen. Kind of hilarious. If I'm Mike Kafka and I want to make a statement as head coach, you want to know what I do? If I really want to send a message to my players, right? I may not have autonomy over if Jalen Hyatt's released, right? If I'm Mike Kafka, I may not have autonomy over if Deontay Banks is released, right? You can't cut Deontay Banks, but autonomy over if Evan Neal is released, right? Don't have autonomy over that. What I do have autonomy over is my staff. Mike Kafka, my first move is I'm firing Shane Bowen. Send a message to this defensive locker room being like, you know what? If you genuinely hate this guy's fucking guts, I got your back. And we're going to do something different. May not work. We're going to do something different. I think that's how you spark. That's how you spark a defense that needs a reason to go out there and play their ass off, because they are They are a soft unit right now that looks uninterested in playing football, especially their veterans up front. Especially some of their veterans up front, not named Brian Burns. That's what I would do. Does Mike Kafka have that autonomy to do that? Would they let Mike Kafka do that? Probably not. And that's bullshit. That would be a great message. I think that would even be a good message to the fans. Mike Kafka takes over interim head coach. Shane Bowen, you're out. All right. The results may not be any different, but at least this is something. At least I'm feeling something. I don't feel anything right now. Shane goes, who do you bring in for defense coordinator? Manuel Margot, the secondary coach, is like the pass game coordinator. So that's that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Appreciate a reaction. I think I am going to have a midweek ep that I'm going to try and also film tomorrow. And it's either going to be an interview with somebody. It may be solo. It may not. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to do. So it could even be a big name interview. I don't know. We'll see. Producer Jeff just texted me again. Did I miss another super chat? Oh, I did. Aaron. The Giants should have traded away Thomas Lawrence and anyone else to get extra draft capital, make that GM spot look even sexier. No, because and Aaron, thank you for leaving the super chat, but I think part of why the GM spot looks good is that you have good players. Dex may be a different conversation, but definitely not Andrew Thomas. Second most valuable position of football. Not trading that. All right. Thanks for everybody watching. I'll see you in the middle of the week. Let's go Giants.